Greetings, friends, and welcome to this bonus podcast episode, as it were, with my friend and mentor and colleague, Dr. Donald Kraybill of Elizabethtown College, certainly the leading expert on the Old Order Amish, and who's just coming out with a really interesting book about what he's learned regarding the Amish, what he's learned from the Amish. And so I just want to welcome you, Don, this
Thank
afternoon.
you. I'm happy to join you and happy to be part of the conversation.
Don, you're a sociologist and a scholar, and as you described this book to me, it sounds a little bit different than what you've done in the past. What's the key idea? Give us a little heads up as to what's coming with this book. It's soon to be released.
Yeah, well, the key idea is that, and I know this sounds counterintuitive and you might think it's audacious, but my key idea is there's a lot we can learn from the Old Order Amish. And it may sound crazy to say, horse and buggy driving people have anything to teach us about technology, for example, in a hyper high speed world. But that's precisely what I argue. And the way the book is constructed, I have 22 essays on 22 different topics where I, in 1,000 to 1,200 words, they're short and tight essays, talk about what the Amish have taught me, or in other words, what I've learned from the Amish. I've reflected over about 4 decades of research and interaction with Old Order Amish people and New Order Amish, horse and buggy driving Amish, and then sifted back through those and identified these 22 topics that I learned from them, and they've taught me, and I think they have valuable wisdom for the rest of us. And I'm talking about topics like smallness, keeping things small rather than big bureaucratic, community, spirituality, education, apprenticeship, having patience. I have an essay on patience and the importance of patience, on why limits are important and why we should limit choices and why that's smart to do. An essay on rituals, on suffering, on forgiveness, on retirement, and on dying. Even essays on entrepreneurship and hacking. There are Amish hackers, not the kind that are doing internet hacking, but the kind that do workarounds to stay within the church's order and yet can move things forward in terms of progress with their technology. So that gives you a little taste and feel of it, Conrad, I hope.
Don, at what point in your study of the Amish, which goes back 3-4 decades, did you begin to understand that there was this kind of personal or social component to the Amish that had implications for society at large? Did that happen immediately for you, or were you drawn into that? Were there key moments for you where you understood that?
Not sure how to answer that. I would just say my first book, The Riddle of Amish Culture, came out in 1989. And I was perplexed by a lot of Amish practices. Like, well, why do they reject and forbid people to own a car and have a driver's license? And yet they ride in it. They hire neighbors as taxis to ride in them. In fact, in this book, I say they out-Ubered Uber because they were doing Uber rides from their neighbors back in the 1920s. And why would they have a tractor at their barns but not take it out into the field? And why could they use power from pneumatic power and hydraulic, but not electricity? So I was just really perplexed with those. And that's what prodded me to get into their research. And then I began as a sociologist in developing face-to-face relationships, realizing that these aren't crazy, stupid things, but these are smart ways for them to cope with modernity, to control modernity. And I have a chapter in the book where I talk about these riddles and how I got started, and how the big lesson they taught me was not to be afraid of modernity, take charge of it and control it and make decisions, and don't go along with the crowd and don't follow all the fancy fads, but be smart and think. And especially with technology, to think about, well, what's their impact, the technology's impact going to be on their children and grandchildren in the community. One bishop told me one time, he said, Don, we don't think everybody that has a car is going to hell. We just think, what's this going to do to our community? It's going to tear us apart. If everybody's riding in a car, driving a car, going to work far away, it'll tear our church congregations apart. And so they're thoughtful about these kind of things. And by the way, I should say there's a podcast, 4 episodes of a podcast where I talk specifically about what I've learned from Amish people. And I have interviewed in each of these episodes an Amish friend of mine. And he helps to elucidate and expand some of these topics. But anyway, I could ramble on and on, Conrad. So
Well, out you bring Uber is classic Kraybill language. I'm sure that there are many twists and turns like that. You're a wonderful writer, Don, and so this has got to be a great book. I'm looking forward to reading myself. Can you say a little bit more about?
If I could intervene on writing the book, this is the hardest book I've written. It's tight.
Why, Don?
And it is hard work to take an idea, like I've had these 22 ideas, and hone it and craft it down tightly so every word carries some freight and you don't have any fuzz or whatever, in the writing. But it is hard work. It's, as the old adage, it's harder to write a short letter than a long one. So anyway, I'm sorry.
No, that sounds like a modernity, Don. It sounds like very efficient writing. No froth, no waste, no.
No fizz.
So you were invited to write this book, or you are writing this book. Where'd the podcast idea come from, and how does that fit? When do these come out? How can people like me get a hold of them?
Yeah, well, I must say, without hopefully revealing you too much, but I had a colleague here at the college named Conrad Carnegie is doing podcasts. And so somebody said to me, well, you should think about doing a podcast. So I've done 4 podcasts, 4 episodes. Each of them is about 12 to 14 minutes long. Each of them focuses on a topic like community, for example, and includes an interview with an Amish friend. And these are going to be released in 4 consecutive Tuesdays in October. The first one will be released October 5, a Tuesday, and then the next 3 consecutive Tuesdays. And you can find them at this site, Amish Teach, it's one word, AmishTeach.buzzsprout.com. Again, that's AmishTeach.buzzsprout, .com.
And I will just jump in here for the listeners and say that link will be on my website, www.churchdismantled.com. The link will also be on the Facebook group, which has 1,100 members. And I will send out an email to my list of subscribers with that also. So Don, I'll be doing everything I can to make that link available and easy to access for folks also. Go ahead.
I was going to say, I appreciate your kindness and generosity. And I wanted to say a word about spirituality.
Yes, please do. I just wanted to add a word that my only concern about you podcasting is you'll out podcast Carnegie. So anyway, no, I'm kidding. Go ahead. We wanted to get to spiritual.
Let's let your listeners make that decision.
Okay. All right. I was sitting here thinking about the fact that I remember the moment, and I tell my students this when I teach Amish Society, after the nickel mines incident shooting, where you said to me, I didn't understand the impact, the centrality of faith, spirituality, religion to the Amish until now. I'll never forget that moment. And so I don't know if you want to talk about that, but I would like you to talk about the spirituality, what you've learned about the Amish.
Well, it's interesting, Conrad. As you start, I almost interrupted you saying I'd like to talk about Amish spirituality.
Yeah.
And where that, and you're exactly right. Nickel mines took place about 15 years ago, October 2nd, 2006. And nickel mines is a sad story where a neighbor came into an Amish school and took 10 young girls hostage and shot them. And 5 of them passed away and died. And within hours, members of the Amish community said they offer forgiveness and grace, and they're not going to hold any anger or revenge or retaliate. And it was a powerful international story. Thousands of media sites worldwide in the next week covered this story, not about the shooting, but about the forgiveness. And you're exactly right. I had brought sort of an analytical mind to my Amish studies from 1989 to 2006. And I got involved in working on a book project related to that called Amish Grace with some colleagues. And I ended up interviewing 35 Amish families. Not all of them were directly involved, but many of them were involved. And for the first time, I felt like I really understood the depth of Amish spirituality, their deep commitment in following Jesus. The big question was, well, why did you guys forgive? Why would you do something so radical within hours after a gunman shot your children, young children, 8 to 14 years old? And the answer was, well, it's what Jesus taught us. And one bishop said, well, Don, just go to the Lord's Prayer. And he said, if you look at the Lord's Prayer, forgive us as we forgive others. He said, then go to the end of the Lord's Prayer, and you'll see that forgiveness is the only idea in the Lord's Prayer that Jesus underscored twice at the end of the Lord's Prayer. It was just this profound, deep commitment to the way of Jesus as they understood it. And so that whole experience helped me understand that Amish people are more than a cultural relic, so to speak. They're more than just something for sociologists to study, but beneath the surface, there's a deep religiosity. Now, are all Amish perfect? No. Do they walk on water? Absolutely not. As one grandmother said, we've got our good ones and our bad ones, just like you do. And so, they're not perfect, and they'll be the first to admit it. And frankly, the book has troubled me somewhat. The title of the book is What the Amish Teach Us, because they aren't out about trying to teach anybody anything. They have a profound humility, and they would say, well, if you can learn something from us, honored, but we're not running a promo campaign or a PR campaign for Amish spirituality, because at the center of it is a deep, deep sense of humility. And I talk about their understanding of salvation, for example, which is different from some mainstream evangelical understandings of salvation. So anyway, I can ramble on,
Yeah.
professors that we are paid to profess. So
Don, as we move towards closing, I do have this question. You've been so helpful to me in thinking about and writing and supporting the work of the Dismantled Church that I've been doing. If the church is being dismantled, as I argue, because modernity has in so many ways created these trappings around the core ideas of Jesus, does that mean, given the way the Amish approach modernity, that they are in some ways immune from that kind of dismantling, that they're already so egalitarian, so without the kind of modern trappings, that they would be immune to the kind of thing I'm talking about? Do you have any thoughts about that?
Absolutely. In fact, I've thought about them a number of times because in your work, where you talk about dismantling the church, you often talk about bureaucracy. You often talk about, religious shrines and buildings. You talk about systematic theology and all theology. These are house churches, Conrad. There are 2,600 Amish congregations across North America. They're house churches. Buildings, no.
Yeah.
Budgets for operation, no. It's all free will offerings. Systematic theology, no. The focus is on the scripture. The focus even reaches back to their martyr tradition and so on. So oddly, they are out ahead.
Yeah.
This church.
And that's great.
That's just an interesting, powerful thing. Does it mean they don't get stuck in some traditions? Of course they do. Traditions of their own making. But in terms of the bureaucratic structure, there's no central organization. There's no as one Amish guy told me, Donnie said, we don't have any popes, we got a lot of bishops, because there's typically one bishop in each congregation, or sometimes a bishop may have two congregations. But you're precisely right, Conrad. They are out ahead, so to speak, of dismantling project. And that makes them, for me, interesting.
Yeah.
Not only in terms of their spirituality, but their lack of bureaucratic organization and lack of systematic theology. They only go to 8th grade in school. And their focus is on how you practice the teachings of Jesus. Forgiveness when you have someone shooting your children. I had a friend of mine had a daughter, she's about 35 years old, and she called me about 3 weeks after nickel mine shooting. She said, Don, I'm just calling you about what you think about the Amish, because my congregation is debating whether they're saved or not. She said, I don't know what to think. I said, well, Sarah, when people in an event like this, like nickel mines, express forgiveness, what can I say? What can I say that would suggest that they're not saved or not being serious followers of Jesus?
Don, you have just been really helpful throughout the last 3 decades in so sensitively walking with the Amish and providing for the rest of us a window into who they are and their, perhaps, I hate to use the word usefulness, but what we can learn from them. And so I'm really looking forward to this piece of what you've done, and just appreciate your sharing it with the rest of us and all that you've contributed and all you've contributed to my life, for sure. I will put this on the website, as I said, and mail it out, and look forward to folks.
The book will come off the press in mid-October. Title is What the Amish Teach Us, and it's already available on Amazon. So, and I think I mentioned the website for the podcast.
So I will put the Amazon link as well as the podcast link on my site. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Don. As always, it's been
my pleasure. My pleasure.
Pleasure to be with you. Thank you. Blessings.